Nigeria's Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Benjamin Kalu, has stated that the decision to abolish the death penalty ultimately rather rests with Nigerian citizens. Speaking in Abuja during a courtesy visit by a delegation from the Death Penalty Project alongside officials from the British High Commission, Kalu emphasized the need for robust debate, collaboration, and stakeholder engagement on the issue. He highlighted that over 130 countries have abolished the death penalty in law or practice, while Nigeria's current legal framework still allows capital punishment for crimes such as murder, armed robbery, and treason. Referencing death row statistics, Kalu underscored the pressing need for criminal justice reform, stressing that laws in Nigeria must evolve in line with societal needs and realities. And so live to speak more on this, we're joined by legal practitioner Uthman Tochukwu. Uthman, thank you very much for joining us. Good afternoon. Now, Uthman, if you're there, from a legal perspective, what are the implications of abolishing the death penalty in Nigeria, and how would it align with international human rights standards?
I thank you very much for having me. It is a good conversation that we are now trying to provoke again, because I understand that for quite some time now, years back, Amnesty International had earlier canvassed for the abolishment of death penalty. And the argument is that it contravenes the provisions of International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. But then we need to also look at it from point of legal activism, in the sense that death penalty is part of the provisions in our ground norms, our constitution, right? If you look at section 33 sub 2 of the 1999 constitution that provides for right for life, right? It also provides for derogation for some of those rights, meaning that right to life is not absolute, because the court can find you guilty of capital offenses such as culpable homicide, treasonable felony, treason, and the likes of other capital offenses that attract death penalty. And as such, your life would be constrained at that point by the state, because the court had pronounced so. The consequences of all these issues is that they are all a question of law, and that would call for a very serious constitutional amendment. It's not enough to have this conversation without approaching the right institutions and authority to see how they can bring it to its full effect. There are other gray areas that we have to also look at it, because if you say that death penalty should be abolished, you need to also look at it from the point of Sharia too, because those are things that is constitutionally recognized, and under Sharia there are certain crimes that warrant a life to be taken. And when we have to also look at abolishment of death penalty, we need to make sure that we'll fine-tune it so that it will not be unconstitutional, going against the provisions of the established laws.
Okay, then, how do you think the Nigerian judiciary would adapt to the abolition of the death penalty, and what changes would be required in sentencing guidelines and also practices?
If you look at the provisions of the constitutions, they are very clear that all offenses that relate to capital offenses attract death penalty. And this has provided difference between offenses that is not capital offenses and offenses that is capital offenses. The two differences is that if I kill somebody, for instance, God forbid, I would be charged for murder because there is an intention for me to kill. And what the law provides is that the person should be killed if found guilty at the end of the day. That is murder. But on the other hand, where you kill without intention, which is manslaughter, right? The law provides for life imprisonment, which may be 20, 25 years, as the case may be, and you finish your sentence. Now, the implication would be that if we abolish death penalty, you won't be able to differentiate in law, what is the sanction for murder, treason, and manslaughter. They become the same thing, because if you say there should not be death penalty, you are also saying that there should be, you are going to provide another alternative, which will maybe life sentence, which the law had already recognized. But the judiciary would only take from, the collective effort of the National Assembly that is saddled under Section 5 of the 1999 Constitution to make laws, right? If the National Assembly are ready to amend the Constitution, then we'll put it to public debate and see whether or not it's something that Nigeria can do away with. But it's also important to also look at it from point of territorial aspect of Nigeria. The fact that other countries have abolished it does not fit into our own system too, because we need to also look at it from the rate of crimes that are being committed in other countries before we can now canvass the same argument in Nigeria. These things are not one cap fits all. Yes.
So in line with that, what are the conditions outside of Nigeria that make it maybe not sustainable in Nigeria?
You need to look at it from a point of criminal rate, that are being committed in Nigeria and then vis-a-vis other countries. How consistent is crime rate with relation to murder and treasonable felony? Remember that under the law, you are not allowed to take over government, without following through democratic process. Some of those things are capital offenses in Nigeria and should attract death penalty. Now, if you say they should remove death penalty in that sense, what did that mean is that people can just wake up one day and want to usurp the power of the president and take over power in Nigeria, start following the legal means, because the consequences has been deterred, has been reduced. No longer death penalty, maybe life imprisonment. People would just feel, if it's life imprisonment, after all, I may even get lucky. I may not die after 20 years or 25 years in prison. I'll still come back and still have some life to live. But when you say that most of these issues that borders around death penalty and the reason behind the inculcation of death penalty in our laws is just for purpose of deterrence. It is actually very difficult to prove a case of murder, because the onus is on the accused, is on the prosecution to prove beyond reasonable doubt. And proving beyond reasonable doubt is not the same thing as proving beyond every shadow of doubt. So it's a very difficult thing to prove. One thing is that the law provides for death penalty, and another thing is that it is most difficult to prove those capital offenses.
Okay. Can you discuss the potential human rights implications of retaining the death penalty in Nigeria, particularly in light of international trends and best practices?
If you look at it from a human rights perspective, it's understandable that under Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution, as amended in 2011, Section 33 provides for right to life, right? And every other section from 33 up to Section 44 provides for different kinds of rights that is inalienable and accrue to every human being as far as you are a human being, right? But then Section 45 of the 1999 Constitution provides for derogation of some of those rights. In other words, Section 45 is saying that those rights, you have it inalienable, nobody can take it away from you. But the exceptions was provided under Section 45, meaning that if you breach any of the provisions of Section 45, right, that means your right in that instance is going to be withdrawn. So these are issues that has to do with law. I had hinted initially that it's a question of law and judicial activism. We need to take it up to the appropriate authorities and begin to, provoke the conversation and see whether we could convince the National Assembly to amend the laws, both the criminal code and penal code, and that of the Constitution, and then bring it to public purview for Nigerians to put it into debate. If it's what majority of Nigerians had agreed to do away with. We're in democracy. The majority should have the voice and it should be abolished. But then it has to deal with constitutional amendment.
Well, Uthman Tochukwu, I want to say thank you very much for giving us your expert advice for this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.